All right, so picture this with me, okay? You're on vacation. You finally made it to that cafe that you bookmarked like months ago. What is it about that place that makes you pull your phone out to take a picture? Is it the architecture? Is it like the way the light hits the coffee cups? Or is it just like the overall vibe of the place?
It's so fascinating, right? Like how a single scene, just a simple scene, can become like this whole bigger thing in our minds.
Right.
And how like our own experiences totally color that perception.
Totally. And you know what's even more fascinating about all this?
What's that?
It turns out that geographers, like actual geographers, have been kind of like wrestling with this very idea for decades.
Yeah.
Like, how do our backgrounds, our cultures, all these things
Totally.
shaped our understanding of the places we encounter?
Yeah.
How do we actually understand all this?
It's a question that goes way beyond just reading maps. Right?
Yeah.
It gets to like the core of how we as humans really make sense of everything around us.
Which brings us to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We're trying to unpack a 1981 paper by David Ley
Okay.
called Cultural Humanistic Geography. Think of this paper as like, I don't know, our guidebook to this really lively debate that was happening at the time.
Exactly, yeah. And it's an academic paper. It's true.
It's true.
But don't worry, we are not going full lecture mode here.
No.
Just think of it as a way to kind of understand all these different perspectives on something that we all experience, which is like having feelings about places.
Literally everyone has feelings about places.
Exactly.
So to set the stage here, we need to talk about this thing, cultural geography. And basically it's like asking, how does culture leave its fingerprints on the world around us? And for a long time, like a good chunk of time, a group known as the Berkeley School had a big influence on this whole field.
Right. And they were really all about this idea of understanding how people impact, like literally impact their environments.
Okay.
Not just in like a we built cities kind of way,
Yeah.
but like digging into the nitty gritty, like the actual details they left behind.
Okay, so like if archaeologists study ancient pottery shards
Right.
to like understand this lost civilization,
Yeah.
were these geographers doing something similar but on like a much larger scale?
Exactly. Think about like a city's layout, right?
Okay.
The Berkeley School would look at that and be like, its street patterns, the types of buildings, even something like where the parks are placed, all that.
Yeah. It tells a story about the people who lived there throughout history.
Wow.
I love that.
So you're saying that if you know how to like read a place, you could uncover layers of cultural influence just hidden in plain sight.
Precisely. And this approach, it has like a lasting impact.
Yeah.
Even today, when we talk about things like urban planning or sustainable development, we're drawing on that idea of human impact
Wow.
that the Berkeley School really brought to the forefront.
It's so true. It's like they were really onto something.
Yeah.
But like any good theory, it wasn't without its critics.
Of course not. Right.
Yeah.
There were other geographers out there saying, hold on, there's more to this story.
Yes.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
This is where it gets good.
This is where humanistic geography comes into play.
Yeah. So to understand this like new wave of thought,
Okay.
we need to consider the time period.
Okay.
So back in the 1960s, geographers, like many academics at the time, got really, really excited about computers, statistics.
Yeah, that was a new era.
All that. They thought, hey, we can use this to study where people live, work, and play.
Data-driven insights.
Exactly. But then some geographers, they started to feel like something was missing.
Really?
In all those numbers. They felt that human experience, those gut feelings you get from a place,
Oh, yeah.
Like that wasn't being captured by spreadsheets.
Interesting. So it was like they were pushing back against a purely analytical approach.
Yeah.
They were saying, hey, our feelings about a place matter too.
Exactly. Imagine you're describing like your favorite childhood park. Would you just list its features? Like, okay, 2 swing sets, a slide, a sandbox. Like, is that it?
Probably not. I would probably talk about how I used to climb my favorite tree.
There you go.
The feeling of the wind in my hair on the swings.
Yes.
Like all that stuff that makes it special, that's what I would talk about.
Exactly. That's what humanistic geographers were trying to bring to the forefront.
Wow.
Those personal, often indescribable experiences, right?
Yeah, they're tough to describe.
They argued that those feelings are just as important for understanding a place as any map or statistic.
Wow. Okay. It's like they were saying that a place isn't just about like its physical coordinates. It's about how those coordinates make you feel.
Exactly. And they were pulling from all sorts of fields to like explore this idea. Literature, art, even music.
Wow.
They argued that to really grasp the human experience of place, we need to go beyond like the purely scientific
Okay.
and delve into this realm of emotions and meaning making.
Okay, so instead of just measuring a city's growth,
Right.
they might ask, like, what does this city symbolize to the people who live there? What are their hopes and dreams tied to this place?
Precisely. And while this new perspective was groundbreaking, it
Mhm.
wasn't, without its critics.
Of course, there are always critics.
Right,
Oh,
yeah. Vettel points out that some geographers felt the humanists were a little too focused on individual feelings,
interesting.
almost to the point of missing the forest for the trees.
Interesting. So it's like, okay, my feelings about this park are valid,
Right.
but they're also shaped by this much larger context.
Exactly. It's not enough to just like acknowledge individual experiences. We also need to consider the historical, social, economic forces
Right.
that shape those experiences.
Like, who has the power to define a place?
Exactly.
Whose voices are heard and whose are silenced?
Exactly. And Levy gives this really compelling example, gentrification.
Yeah.
When a neighborhood starts changing, new businesses pop up, rents go up,
Yeah.
and suddenly the people who've lived there for years are being priced out
Right, and it's happening in cities all over. It's like,
everywhere.
yeah, and it's a perfect example of how those bigger forces you're talking about, those power dynamics, they can just radically transform a place, and often at the expense of the people who made it what it was.
Absolutely. And this ties back to our earlier point about reading a place. The Berkeley School taught us to look for the historical layers embedded in a landscape.
Right.
But the humanists remind us that those layers often contain stories of conflict, inequality, and change.
So it's not just about appreciating the beauty of a place. It's about also understanding the sometimes messy, complicated reality
Yes.
of how it came to be.
Exactly. And that's a really key takeaway from Ley's paper.
Okay.
He's not saying one perspective is right and the other is wrong.
Right.
He's advocating for a more nuanced understanding of place,
Okay.
one that acknowledges the power of both individual experience and those larger social forces.
Okay, so it's like wearing 3D glasses.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need multiple lenses to fully appreciate the depth and complexity of how people and places interact. Now, there was one more thing that Lee brought up that I found really intriguing,
Okay.
especially given when this paper was published.
Okay.
Consumption culture.
Oh, interesting.
It's like he was already sensing the huge impact our buying habits would have on the world around us.
Absolutely. Remember, this is 1981.
Yeah, that's true.
The shopping mall was becoming a cultural icon,
So true.
and globalization was starting to connect people and products in these like unprecedented ways.
Right.
And Lee seemed to recognize that this was a game changer for how we understand the relationship between people and places.
Right. Because it's not just about where we buy things anymore.
Totally.
It's about how those choices, from the clothes we wear to the gadgets we use, shape the entire landscape.
Mm-hmm.
From like sprawling factories overseas to the delivery trucks clogging up our city streets.
And don't forget the psychological impact.
Oh, right.
Consumption has become so intertwined with our identities, our aspirations, our sense of belonging.
It's true. We buy things to feel like we belong.
All of that. Ley seemed to be hinting at the need to explore this complex relationship
Yeah.
between the places we inhabit, the things we buy, and how those things contribute to who we are or who we think we want to be.
It's like our shopping carts are these little mini bulldozers just like reshaping the world,
Yeah.
one purchase at a time. Whether we realize it or not.
It's true, though.
It's true.
Yeah, and it's, like you said, it highlights how intertwined, like, geography and consumerism have become.
Right.
Even back in 81, Ley seemed to be saying, hey, pay attention to this. This is going to be big.
And it was.
And it was.
So after this deep dive, I mean, we've gone through maps and feelings and shopping sprees.
We've covered it all.
What's the big takeaway for our listeners here? Like, what does Ley want us to remember?
I think what he'd want us to take away from all this is the next time you're out in the world,
Yeah.
whether it's a bustling city or your own, like, quiet neighborhood,
Yeah.
just put on your, I don't know, your geographer glasses
I like it. I like it.
and take a closer look at things, Notice the details, the layers of history, the way people interact with the space,
And not just the pretty stuff.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Remember those power dynamics?
Yes, yes.
The social forces that we talked about? Like,
all of that.
who benefits from the way this place is designed?
Yeah.
Whose stories are being told and whose are being left out?
Exactly, because understanding a place isn't just about knowing its coordinates on a map, right?
Right.
It's about recognizing the human stories, like
Yeah.
woven into its very fabric. The joys, the
Hmm.
struggles, the triumphs, and the injustices, you know?
Yeah, and maybe once we start seeing the world through that lens,
Yeah,
we can start making choices that lead to a more just and equitable world,
I love that.
one place at a time.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there you have it, a whirlwind tour through the fascinating world of cultural and humanistic geography,
Like it.
guided by the insightful words of David Ley. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to see the world with fresh eyes
Yes.
and to consider the many ways our lives are intertwined with the places we call home.
Well said.
And who knows, you might even start noticing those geographic fingerprints
There you go. I like that.
everywhere you go.
Everywhere you go.
Until next time, happy exploring.
Yeah, happy exploring.
Yeah.